Washington Journal continues.
Texas Republican Congressman Louie Gohmert is back at our desk, a member of the House Judiciary Committee, joining us for a discussion on immigration policy. You've expressed support for the president's zero-tolerance policy. So did President Trump make a mistake last week with his executive order that ended family separations?
No, because there's a difference between zero tolerance and allowing families to stay together. But let's face it, every day across America, I saw it when I was a felony judge. When people commit crimes, they come into court, kids leave going one way, and the criminal, the violator, goes another. It happens every day. But with regard to immigrants coming in, I think obviously the biggest violator of splitting parents and children are the parents. You know, nearly 90%. I guess I know you've seen the numbers, I'm sure. 12,000 are being held right now. Over 10,000 of them were separated by their parents, and they were sent up. I mean,
these are the unaccompanied minors.
Unaccompanied, but I've been there all hours of the night also when I see a little child being passed back and forth, and it's like they're trying to decide who's going to say that child is theirs, and sometimes they'll say, no, we're not going to claim the child. So I'm not really convinced.
You've seen that happen?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I've seen people exchange addresses. They have an address on a piece of paper as to where they're saying they need to go. And I've seen them switch those papers while the Border Patrol's talking. And it's amazing what you see at 3 in the morning.
Are family separations an effective deterrent to immigrant families coming to this country?
Well, I would have said no, but we've heard from some immigrants or people that were thinking about immigrating that they don't want to take a chance on being separated from their children once they get to the United States. So it's possible, but that's not something that really we should encourage. Personally, I'm working on a bill that would say if somebody does not come in to one of the official ports of entry, then they're immediately to be turned back, not even given a hearing. You're probably aware, but when someone comes into the United States at an official port of entry, then not only are they not separated, they're kept together, they're allowed to make their asylum claim, they get it before a judge. So it's only when they come in through a different place other than official port of entry that they're separated.
Define due process for those people who come into this country illegally.
Well, it depends on, well, okay, so you say for people that come in illegally. For them, due process is not the same under our Constitution as somebody who's a U.S. citizen being charged with, say, a felony.
What rights do they have under our Constitution?
They have the right to claim asylum, but only if they come through an official port of entry. They can claim it if they don't come through an official port of entry, but I'm hoping we're going to change that. But if they do come through an official port of entry, then due process includes keeping their children with them. So hopefully they'll be encouraged to do that. But let's face it, nearly 90%, they're separated by their parents. They're sent across terrain that is, I mean, Texas Child Protective Service would no doubt take those children away from a parent that would send them across that kind of terrain and put them in the hands of gangs. You know, the gangs are the ones that are the coyotes on behalf of the drug cartels. Border Patrol, they tell me over and over again when I'm down there, they control every inch of the border. Nobody comes across the border unless they have gotten the okay from the drug cartel.
You mentioned your immigration legislation proposal. Yeah. Why weren't Republican leaders able to pass an immigration bill in the House last week?
Because there are a lot of people that have scared some Republicans into thinking if they don't grant some kind of amnesty, they won't get reelected. And I am all for a zero tolerance to the point that if you violate the law coming into the country, you come in illegally, then you go and you come in legally. That to me would be the proper zero tolerance.
Last week, the one bill that did get a vote was the Good Lot immigration bill, considered to be more conservative. You didn't support that piece of legislation?
I supported all of it except the last 30 pages or so that gave an amnesty to DACA. We have all said...
How did it do that for folks who are less familiar than you on the immigration?
Because it legalized DACA, and DACA was an unconstitutional action by the president. The president said it over 20 times. He does not have the power to come in and do what he did. And by the way, some people say, well, he signed an executive order on DACA. He didn't even sign an executive order. He spoke it as any good monarch would, and then Jay Johnson, Secretary of Homeland Security, went back and did a series of memos. He didn't even sign it, and yet he changed law that was voted for by the House and the Senate, signed by presidents, and they just changed it with a series of memos by the DHS.
Congressman Louie Gohmert with us until about 8 o'clock this morning, taking your calls and comments. Republicans, it's 202-748-8001. Democrats, 202-748-8000. Independents, 202-748-8002. As folks are calling in, Republican leaders still working on that so-called compromise piece of immigration legislation. Here's a headline from Politico this morning.
Well, it wasn't a compromise with me because I was not allowed in the room yet. 4 years ago, I was allowed in the room, Steve King and others, and we had really all ends of the spectrum from the Republican Party were in the room, and over about 3 hours' time, we agreed, we compromised on a bill. That was a compromise bill, and as I understand it, we got virtually every Republican vote on that bill, but it's not a compromise if you don't let every position into the room to agree.
So would you agree with this headline from Politico? Republicans are bracing immigration failure this week.
Well, only because our leadership was pushing the wrong bill. And you would have seen some of our own leaders as recently as last Thursday telling the public that, yes, this so-called compromise bill is going to get a lot more votes than the Goodlatte bill. And all of us were going, how could they say that? No, it's not even going to come close. And we proved to be right, and the so-called leadership of the Republican Party was completely wrong. I don't know why they were saying either A, they were misrepresenting what they knew to be the truth, or B, they are that out of touch with where their rank and file of their party is.
Well, which do you think it is? Is this current Republican leadership team still effective?
Well, they certainly won last week, and they're certainly not being effective on the issue of immigration.
Would they be more effective if Paul Ryan stepped down before November?
Well, let's see what happens this week. I would think it depends on what happens this week.
Do you think this is a make-or-break week for Paul Ryan?
It's possible it could be, because it depends on what he does. If he continues to be that insensitive to the vast majority of the will of the Republican Party, then that's not the place for somebody that doesn't understand Goodlatte was going to get a lot more votes than the compromise. I asked the question in conference to our speaker. I really didn't get a response, but I said, you know, the rumor is that you guys are not willing to put a family separation fix on the Goodlatte bill. And it sounds to me like you're afraid if you do that, the Goodlatte bill will pass. And I never really got a response as to why they would not put the separation, the fix for the family separation, because that was going to get a bunch of votes, whether they put that on the so-called compromise bill or the Goodlatte bill.
Would that narrow family separation fix pass as a standalone measure?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Is that the direction they're going?
And I think the Democrats would be afraid to vote against it if it's a standalone bill. So you always ask good questions, but that's a great question, because I hope that our leadership, our elected leadership, will get that message, bring it to the floor as a standalone. But if you bring the so-called compromise that was not really a compromise with everybody, then you're endangering your leadership position, because it tells the world we are so out of touch. We thought, and they said, this compromise bill will get a whole lot more votes than the Goodlatte bill, and all of us in the Republican, most of us were going, that's just not true. How do you not read your own members better than that?
Our callers always ask good questions too. We'll let you chat with them. Okay. Lewis is up first. Colorado Springs, line for Republicans. Lewis, go ahead.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
And good morning, Representative Gohmert.
Good morning.
I just wanted to call and thank you so much for all that you do.
Louis, thank you.
You're doing a good job, and I wanted you to know that, at the end of the day, sometimes in Congress, you give a talk or a speech, whatever they call it technically, but we do listen to that, and it's very informative, and some of the things you've talked about how you became a congressman and so on, and the thing about Mueller, that's unbelievable. I don't know where that guy's got any position at all. He should be in the clinker. But anyway, I wanted to thank you for all that and for what you're doing, and you're right there on the border, and you know what's going on, so I've been listening to what you're saying. And
thank you, Louis. Thank you, Louis. There's not many things here in Washington that make you feel good, so I really appreciate your comments. Wow.
Maria's an independent from Westville, New Jersey. Maria, go ahead.
Maria, it's good to have you on.
Thank you, Judge Gohmert. You're a hero of the Constitution. We ought to be grateful for every day that you speak.
Thank you.
I wish you would just give us all a lesson on the definition of sedition, which I'm seeing as an incitement of discontent towards a resistance against lawful authority, which I believe is what's going on with the sanctuary cities. And as far as the news reporting conflating illegal aliens with lawful immigrants, is that not also seditious libel? And could you tell us why Congress, which is composed mostly of lawyers, seems to ignore this, and why Attorney General Sessions has not made arrest of the people who are in charge of the sanctuary cities? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Maria. And I hear Maria, and I want to sing West Side Story. Maria once met a girl named Maria, but it's an interesting point because, and with Maxine Waters' comments, it seemed to stir people up. It is raised, and I've heard people raise the question: is that sedition? That's not sedition, but it possibly could be inciting to violence. It remains to be seen. But
does it make you more worried today as a Republican member of Congress?
Well, not for my own personal safety. I was threatened a lot more when I was a felony judge than I've been threatened plenty now as a congressman. But I got a lot of insight into Maxine once in a judiciary hearing when she explained as a little girl about having a cross burned in their yard and how scared she was for her father. And when I heard her describe what went on, it told me a lot. My gosh, this person's been through things no one should ever have to go through. And so as contrary as she can be to the position of Republicans, it gave me a lot of insight. And they say you can't truly sympathize unless you've been there. Well, I hope nobody else ever has to go there and have a cross burned on their yard. And so that's really why I was so shocked that it was Maxine that was encouraging people to go en masse and scream and basically scare people. And with little children there, just like she was when these people should have gone to jail. I don't know if they did or not for burning a cross and scaring little children like they did, but it sure was a shock to me that after she had experienced that as a child, she would encourage that kind of conduct to scare other children.
To the Lone Star State, Joan is in Fort Worth. Line for Democrats. Go ahead.
Hi, Joan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You just made a comment about scaring little children.
Yeah.
Isn't it a shame that's what we're doing right now on the border? But my question is, I'm very curious why the press has not been allowed in to see what is going on. We rely strictly on government-produced photos. You're showing what you want us to see. Let the press in. Let us see what is really going on, or is it all that horrible?
Well, it's a great question, Joan. And as far as I know, the press is allowed in. I've been down to the border all hours of the day and night. I've had reporters ask if they could go with me because they know I don't go on scheduled tours. I've done those before, but I go out and just go down to the border by myself and just see what I see, talk to who's there. But as far as the pictures, she asked the same question I was wondering about. Why does the press just rely on these pictures that have been given? And I'm afraid some of the press actually went back and found pictures. And we know that there was one little boy that just broke your heart to see him holding, you know, the wires, what looked like he was in a cage. And then it turns out actually he was not in a cage. He was there with the protesters. And then we know the little girl that was on the front of Time magazine, actually she was not separated from her mother. But it was shocking that the media accepted pictures from 2014 and 2011 and put those up as far as representations of children being separated from parents when that was going on back during President Obama. And I've had like the Dallas News, and you're going to have Hakeem Jeffries on. He said he was correcting me at a hearing in the last couple of weeks, and turns out I was right, he was wrong. But it's amazing how people do accept things just as they see them without looking further. And I think the internet actually contributes to that. People go online, they see a picture, oh my gosh, this must be the, you know, what Trump is doing, separating the children. Turns out, no, it was President Obama. But that also happened during the Bush administration. It did not happen as much during the Obama years or the Bush years or the Clinton years, but it did happen during those times. And now people like Jay Johnson have borne that out.
Marcus, Freeville, New York, line for independence. Go ahead.
Hey, Marcus.
Hi, I want to talk about the root causes of the immigration crisis we have today. And the reason why people are fleeing from mostly Central American countries is because back in the 80s, we had President Ronald Reagan, who was a bit of a cowboy, and decided to go down there and overthrow democratically elected governments. And so when he did that, that created this massive power vacuum that let gangs rise to power in those countries and cause a lot of violence and crime down there. Another thing that fuels gang violence is the lust for drugs that we have in this country. We consume more cocaine than any other country in the world, and almost all of that comes from Central America and South America, where these gangs are just running rampant. And I have some solutions that we could work with to solve this crisis. We could send more foreign aid to these countries so their governments can you know, get a handle on the situation.
Yeah, but those are corrupt governments. They'll just use it for more drug cartel work. They're controlled by the drug cartel mostly.
You don't know that. You don't know that.
Well, I know I'm more familiar with what happened in Central America apparently than you are, because if you look at the people that Ronald Reagan supported, he was going up against the people that were supported by the Soviet, by the communists, and thank God that we did not allow the foothold that they were trying to get back at that time. But let's look at Mexico.
Marcus, hold on. Let's let the congressman answer.
Do you know who's controlling Mexico? The drug cartels have such a powerful hold, and I would submit to you that any leader in Mexico that does not want a wall to help us stop that flow of drugs is either in the pocket of the drug cartel, they're afraid of the drug cartel, or they're completely ignorant. Because if we were going to be a truly good neighbor for Mexico, we would do everything we could to stop anything illegal from coming into this country. And that's particularly, we do have a lust for drugs, and boy, is that being filled across our southern border, just as you said, Marcus. So you stop that 80, it's been estimated 80 billion or so came across last year. I don't know if that's accurate, maybe a lot more than that. You cut off the $80 billion going to the drug cartels, then they cannot afford people to cut policemen's head off and put them on pikes and cut off mayors' heads, and just the debauchery, the murder that's going on. Mexico has some of the hardest working people in the world. They've got more natural resources than most countries in the world. They've got just a prime location between two oceans. I mean, they are primed to be one of the top 10, maybe even top 5 economies in the world. Why are they not? Because of the drug cartel control. And by the way, the business model of the drug cartels, they're actually getting their employees pay the drug cartels for that. And then they come, and as our Border Patrol has said, you know what the drug cartels call us and Border Patrol what? We're their logistics. They bring people across the border and drop them off, and then we're the logistics. We take them to cities where the drug cartels want them. And I've heard Border Patrol ask people there, well, how much are you paying? Maybe $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. Well, you don't have that money. Where'd you get that money? And then they say, well, I had 1,000 here, some will say 2,000, 1,500, and then they got 1,000 from somebody in America and 1,000 from somebody in Central America. Where's the rest coming from? They always say the same thing. They're going to let me work it off when I get to the city where I'm going. So our Homeland Security, whether it's the Trump administration, Obama, Bush, they deliver those people to the cities that they'll have an address. And I've watched them swap addresses. They've got the little piece of paper where they say they've got to go. We're shipping them to cities so they can be drug traffickers. And in some cases, it scares me, but we know they become part of a sex trade. So if we really want to help Mexico and Central America, we will stop anything from coming across our southern border, cut off the drugs, and then Mexico and Central America really come into the economy they should have all along.
Less than 10 minutes left with Congressman Louie Gohmert, Republican of Texas, member of the Judiciary Committee. On Thursday, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and Christopher Wray, FBI Director, will be before a joint hearing in the Judiciary Committee and Oversight and Government Reform. What are you specifically going to ask Rod Rosenstein if you get a chance?
Well, there's a lot of issues with Rosenstein. He was involved in the original Russia investigation. When Russia, we knew we had somebody in the organization. They were trying to get U.S. Uranium illegally, and we had Rosenstein that was involved in that as U.S. attorney, and the head of the FBI was involved in that, and a guy named Weissman. They were all involved in investigating that, and so they put the squelch on that information. If they had allowed all the information they knew to come out, there's no way CFIUS, the Commission on Foreign Investments in the U.S., could have approved that deal that ultimately led to $145 million donations into the Clinton Foundation. So there are a lot of issues there. Rosenstein's been involved in a great deal, and for goodness sakes, Rosenstein was involved getting the fourth FISA order from the FISA court when he absolutely knew or should have known that there was not a proper basis for getting that warrant continued. So there are all kinds of issues that need to be asked of Rosenstein. There's going to be an issue today. The Democrats are raising the issue that proper notice wasn't given. My understanding is we're supposed to give 7 days notice.
On this hearing on Thursday?
On the hearing on Thursday, and that proper notice wasn't given. So I think that's going to be one of our issues for discussion. And I know people like my dear friend Jim Jordan, he's got a child getting married this weekend and was not going to be here, and he had begged the chair not to set it on Friday or Thursday afternoon. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe it goes, maybe it doesn't.
So for now, C-SPAN is planning to cover it. If it does happen at 1 p.m. on Thursday, it'll be on C-SPAN 3, cspan.org. You can listen to it on the free C-SPAN radio app. We'll, of course, look to see what happens today with that hearing. Patricia's waiting to talk to you. Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, Republican. Good morning.
Hi, Patricia.
Hi, good morning. I want to thank you for all that you do, and please tell Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan, and Matt Gaetz that we love them and follow them.
Okay.
And I want to ask, why can't Speaker Ryan do what we, the people, elected President Trump's agenda? Why is it Ryan's agenda? Or why don't they listen better? Because you listen to us, but why does it Ryan?
Oh,
and
Patricia,
can he be removed?
Yeah, well, yes, that's a possibility, but I'm wondering the same thing, and actually I kicked myself, and I know there's some Democrats that think I ought to kick myself harder, but I asked that question of the Speaker in front of the conference before we held our Speaker's election. There was no appetite in the Republican Party for a big fight over the Speaker's race, and so Paul didn't have an opponent, but I wanted to know exactly what you're asking. He had not supported, he didn't support a wall. He supported some forms of amnesty. The things that got Trump elected, Paul had not supported. And of course, Donald Trump, the candidate, had talked about tariffs, and Paul was against those. But my question then was, you know, since you didn't support any of the things that got Donald Trump elected president, are you going to support those major pillars of his campaign? And the response was that, look, we're getting along great. And well, that's not my question. My question is, are you going to help him accomplish the things that he said had to be accomplished? And the response was, look, we talk at least once or twice every day. We're doing fine. I'm going, that's not my question. And I never really got an answer to the question. And like I say, there was no appetite for a speaker's race in our party. It would have fallen on deaf ears. So I hoped and prayed he would get behind President Trump. His effort to repeal Obamacare, to build a wall, to totally secure the southern border, no amnesty. And now we see a year and a half in what happens when you have a speaker that is not totally in support of the president's positions in the campaign.
Just a couple minutes left. We'll try to get you a couple calls. Eugene, thanks for waiting at Randolph, Massachusetts.
Hey, Eugene.
Line for Democrats. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. And I'd just like to say a few points. And hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Eugene. What's your points?
My point is, I just want to tell the representative that as a country, we must come together, all the parties, to come with a solution, because zero tolerance doesn't mean no compassion. I understand that you can detain, and the kids, the parents could be temporarily not be with the kid, and there's a way to do it, but it takes every idea to do it. But the other point is other people made. Look at what happened to Central America. Like when we planted our leaders, and the people and the humanitarian people go out the window, because whoever we plant as a dictator, they do not concern about the people. They building palaces, and that's what the vacuum comes in.
Yeah. Well, and that's true, and that's how Castro got in. We had people supporting Castro when he overthrew the government. But you make a good point, Eugene. I really do wish we could come together, and I'm not scared. I know where I go when I die, but I am scared for my country when I see this kind of anger building and people stoking that. We do need to come together. But I heard a caller in the previous half hour talking about, John Kennedy, and that's the kind of thing. He was the kind of model we should follow. He was for cutting taxes. He was like Hubert Humphrey, who gave a great speech on the importance of a husband and wife in the home. The things that Kennedy and Hubert Humphrey, as liberals in the party back then, talked about would make them unacceptable in the Democratic Party today, because they didn't believe in same-sex marriage. We were fundamentally transformed during Obama's years, and those icons in prior years would not make it in the party today.
One more call for you. We'll end on a Texan. Jim's a Republican from Whitesboro. Jim, can you make it quick?
Yes, I will. Representative Gohmert, so happy to talk to you.
Thanks,
what I see happening is, for the first time in my life, we have not had a peaceful transfer of power. People were upset that Hillary didn't win, and I just don't see that transfer of power happening smoothly. Now, on the immigration, I wonder if there is any possible deal that the Democrats would accept, because it seems to me that it looks.
Yeah, they want an
as
amnesty.
they can make Trump look bad.
Yeah, they want an amnesty, and we simply can't do that. But there was a pastor in our First Baptist Church of Mount Pleasant when I was born, and my parents used to quote him as saying, if two people agree on everything, one of them is unnecessary. And I've used that in deacons' meetings in our church when they, people would get really angry. And I've used it in our conference before. It's good to have disagreement. Unless one person has 100% lock on God's truth all the time, we need to disagree. But we have got to do it more peacefully than what's being advocated. I am very concerned for my country right now, and I appreciate your interest in having me.
Appreciate your
Thanks
time.
so
I know
much.
you got a busy day ahead.